story begins more than 60 years ago inside an abandoned chicken coop where our founder discovered a retired teacher living, no home, no health care. So she said no to this injustice and yes to transforming lives. It's this drive, this compassion that inspired AARP. Today, we empower people to choose how they live as they age. We advocate for health and financial security. We strengthen communities everywhere. We are AARP Georgia, creating real possibilities.
There's an old expression that says when you see something written that says, if you can read this, thank a teacher. And when I first saw that, it had significant impact on me because I could read it. But as I think about education, it involves more than just reading. As a matter of fact, education affects all walks of life. And sometimes I think it's overlooked, the role that education can, has, and will play in our community. And Central Georgia has made some phenomenal strides as it relates to education, the improvement in education, and some people recognizing the value and importance of education. So today I thought it would not be robbery because of the significant role that education plays in our community to have two individuals from our community who have been intimately and intricately involved in education in the person of Mr. George Mccanless, President and CEO of the United Way. And the United Way does a lot of things, and education is one of them. Also, Mr. Blake Sullivan, who's used to be the co-chair of the Business Education Project. That's close enough. Yeah, we'll talk about it. So I want to welcome both of you guys here, and I want to thank you for a couple of reasons. First of all, for your personal interest in the advancement of education, and then your organizational and beyond the call of duty, if you please, interest in education. You know, it's close to my heart. Neither one of you may know this, but I used to be a teacher. You know, I taught at Central High School, and I went to college as a teacher. And I enjoyed teaching, and I still do. I teach in the prison system now. And I know, you know, the different areas that education can positively, the right kind, affect in our community. But before we get into the particulars of your individual roles in education, tell us a little bit about yourself. Start with you, Blake.
Good. So Alex, I grew up in Grange, Columbus, Georgia. My dad was in the textile business, and so I went to public schools all of my life until I went to graduate school. So I believe a lot in public education. But I moved here to Macon in 2001, and I'm in the timber business. I manage forest land, that's what I do. For a long time, I kept my nose to the grind wheel and worked to raise a family and provide for them. Found myself with some free time, and so now I've worked to give back to my community in some volunteer ways. And public education for me has been the best way so far to give back to our community. So it's been a big impact on my life to be involved in seeing the benefits of public education, especially as it relates to jobs and helping our young people become productive adults, and that's the main thing.
Yeah. George?
Well, like Blake, I'm an import as well. I grew up in North Carolina, and as many people may know, I spent a lot of my career in the newspaper business and moved to Macon 12 years ago as publisher of the Telegraph. And I was publisher of the Telegraph for 5 years until I went to United Way and have been CEO there for 7 now. And yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family that education was paramount. And you know, I had people, my grandparents lived in the home, and my grandparents and my parents, I mean, they always made sure that I was keeping up with my studies. And so I think the big thing for me is when I was early in my newspaper career, I was asked to coach Little League Baseball, and we were coaching, some kids from the inner city, and I had one young man specifically. We called him John Douglas, and he and I just kind of bonded. And he was from a single parent family, and I was able to develop a mentor relationship with him. And from that experience, my wife and I don't have children, but I always wanted to do what I could to help children get the education they need, because it's no secret that here in Bibb County we have a high poverty rate. There's only two ways that you're going to get out of poverty: education that will allow you to get a decent paying job. And so that's what, since I've been at United Way, I have been trying to turn the focus that we're trying to work with the school system to improve the education.
Outstanding. Now, Blake, a lot of people, although he got whippings about his lesson, a lot of people don't really, some people may not understand the peripheral effect of education. Not only does it train one to know the ABC 1, 2, 3, but there are other peripheral effects of a positive education. And I think that a program in which you have been involved kind of played that role. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I will, Alex. When I started looking at public education here, it was 2014, and our school district was in quite disarray at that moment in time. And I felt like that our public schools were the only thing that was really holding back our community from being a great place to live and work. And so I got involved with something called the Business Education Partnership. That had sprung out of the One Macon plan. And I started going to meetings. I went to the very first one when we had an interim superintendent, and business community showed up and the schools showed up, and we signed this partnership agreement that we would work together to try to help our public schools. So after a couple of years, I became co-chair of that. One of the best practices that sprung out of that One Macon initiative was something called the Leader in Me. It was based on, or is based on, Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it basically teaches habits that have been taught at home for a long time, but it reinforces those in the schools. And what it does is it basically teaches our children how to be leaders of themselves. I've always been surrounding myself with leaders that I want to follow, that I look up to and respect. And I believe so much in leadership that when this process came along, I said, it's going to be transformative in our school district. It's going to really change the way our students come to school and are prepared to school and have a different outlook on learning. And as one of the 7 habits says, begin with the end in mind. Every child that goes to school needs to understand that going to school is just not a one-time endeavor, that you go there to consume information. It is there so that there is learning put in place for lifetime success.
Yes.
And so that's where I started. We formed this partnership with the school district and the Chamber of Commerce. We raised enough money back in 2015 to fund 2 schools. In 2016, we funded 2 more. By this time, I was co-chair with Dr. Jones of the Business Education Partnership. And so I went to him and I said, look, this is crazy. I said, we'll both be long gone from here or dead, before we ever get it in all these schools. And so I asked him to go to Franklin Covey, who oversees this teaching of the process to our teachers. I said, find out how much it costs. And so we had a meeting, and I sat across the table from him, and he said it's going to cost $2.18 million to do it. Well, I was shocked, number one, at the number, but I really wasn't. I knew that anything good cost a lot. And so after I thought about it for a minute, I said, look, I'm willing to try to raise this money if you will put it in every elementary and middle school. So we came to an agreement, and he said, I'll do that if you raise the money. I said, okay. So I left that meeting, and I told him before I left, I said, I'm going to ask Bill Gates for $1 million. And he looked at me like I was the craziest human that ever walked in his office. And I went and penned a letter and a request, and I put a proposal together, and I sent it to President Carter down in Plains, who was one of my clients, and he sent it out to Bill Gates, and I made sure that a copy went back to Dr. Jones. I never did get $1 million from Bill Gates, but what I did was I earned some trust from Dr. Jones, and that was so important. And within 7 months, we had raised $2.1 million in our community. Most all of it local. About 90% of it came local. That's a heck of a testament for our community to step up and say, look, we believe in public education, and we want to do something to improve it. And so we raised that money. We had a big celebration. I'm not going to talk about what you and I did.
You can talk about it.
But anyway, when I was on your show last time, I said, look, I'm just a big cheerleader. And you said, well, if you raise that money, we'll put on a cheerleader costume and celebrate. And so I held you to your word.
I almost fell out of it. He said, how old is your uniform? So we had what you call it, the pom-poms.
Pom-poms and marching band and everything else, drum corps, you name it, we had it. And so right after that announcement, I sat down with Sean Covey, who's in charge of that for Franklin Covey, and he said, we just rolled out the high school piece. And I said, well, let me know how much it is, and I'll think about it. And I talked to Dr. Jones, and I said, look, I'm willing to try to raise some more money if you want to implement it. And he said, absolutely. So took a little longer this time, about a year, but we raised the other $700,000, and so right at $2.875 million this community raised. And now we were the first school district, public school district in the state of Georgia that will have the Leader in Me K through 12.
Wow.
Every single school.
Wow.
Now, we still have some schools that will go in next year for the first cohort or the last cohort. So we're not there, but all is funded and all are committed to go in.
Before you finish, can you just talk a little more before we hear about Georgia's initiative, about what the Leader in Me really is? Just talk a little bit about, because a lot of people may not be familiar with that. So just take a minute.
Sure.
And talk about what it is and the kind of impact it can have on learners.
Yeah. So the Leader in Me is about 7 habits that Stephen Covey went out into the world, and he looked at people who were leaders, and he looked at what they did and what they believed and how they came about to be such leaders that they were. And he distilled all that into 7 habits. And these 7 habits, every one of those leaders had. And so they're easy, put first things first, begin with the end in mind, listen before you speak, synergize. All of these habits are things that we all need to know to be successful in life. And so the impact that it's had on the kids is it now gives them a chance to be a leader of themselves.
Wow.
So remember, a lot of them today are, they have so many distractions and so much things that go on around them, either at home or with social media or whatever it is. And this gives them the tool set in order to employ to say, look, I know how to handle these things. I know how to make myself better. These tools allow them to do that.
And if a parent wants to learn more, but they can just Google or get there. A lot of these old folks don't know about Google, but they can get their young people to Google the leader in me or the 7 habits.
Yeah. Let me tell you about just the things that happen right off the bat. First of all, our schools had a lot of discipline problems with them. And once we started talking about Leader in Me and training children, the discipline problems in our classrooms went down dramatically. That means that when a teacher wanted to teach, she was not distracted by somebody acting up in class. That's a huge thing right there. The other thing it did was allow kids to help combat bullying or any of the social pressures that may be out there. It gave them the tool to do that. And then what we found was that our teachers were actually practicing the 7 habits too, so it made the climate in the schools so much better. And then the last piece was the kids are taking the 7 habits home to mom and dad. And now we're teaching the parents as well, and the kids are doing the teaching, which I just find extraordinary.
That is phenomenal. I want to thank you and congratulate you for that initiative. $3 billion, you can't just whistle at it and
That's right.
and raise that kind of money. And I too have heard the kind of positive impact that this program has had, and you have been primarily responsible. So thank you and congratulations. George.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, talk about the United Way's role in education and how you feel that the United Way has a responsibility, and maybe some of the initiatives that you all are engaged in. But first of all, this is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Haversham, interviewing Mr. Blake Sullivan of Business Education Project. I might have gotten that wrong, but that's okay. And Mr. George Mccanless of the United Way, President and CEO of the United Way. So talk about the United Way and its roles and responsibilities and relationships.
Well, so as far as our education work, just a couple months after I started at United Way, Bill Underwood, president at Mercer, called me. And as you and many others may remember, they had had the planning grant for the Promised Neighborhood Initiative. And the money for the planning grant was over, and they did not get the implementation grant, but they had started some work, one of which was a tutoring program. And he just didn't want to see all that money go to waste and then nothing keep on going. And so he came and he thought this would be something good for United Way. And he was right, because we were looking for something to do with education. So when we started this, you being a former teacher, and I know all the former teachers out there know the old axiom that up to 3rd grade you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you have to be able to read to learn. Well, in 2013, when we started Read United, only 38% of the 3rd graders in Bibb County were reading at grade level. And the statistics nationwide will show you that a child that's not reading at grade level has a 13 times less chance of graduating high school.
Wow.
There's no single better predictor of graduating high school than 3rd grade reading level. And so Steve Smith was here as the school superintendent, soon to be succeeded by Dr. Jones. And we established a partnership with the Bibb County School System, where we go out and recruit volunteer tutors to go in and spend an hour a week tutoring children. And to speed up to present day, this past year, we were in over 200 classrooms in Bibb County in 13 elementary schools. We had over 300 volunteer tutors, and we tutored over 600 children.
Wow.
And the grade level reading, third grade reading level has gone from 38%. This past year it was up to 67%.
Wow.
And so I think we are definitely making progress.
So that program is still ongoing?
It's still on. We still have a 67% is better than 38, but it's not 90 or 100%. But I'm
saying, do you still need readers or volunteers?
Yes, we need volunteers. The only reason that we're not in more schools is we don't have enough volunteers. So if you're watching this program and you want to help the education outcomes in Bibb County, go to unitedwaycg.org and click on volunteer. I mentioned earlier that I've been a Little League coach. When I volunteered as a tutor, that was more rewarding than it was bonding with the Little League players, because when you go in that classroom and you're helping that child learn to read, you know that you are changing the trajectory of that child's life. This past year was our best year. 89% of the third graders that were in the Read United program were reading at grade level on the Georgia Milestone Test. So it is. So we're headed in the right direction. To piggyback a little bit on what Blake and with the leader and me, it's not one program or one thing that's going to solve the whole problem, but it's us all working together. Blake mentioned reaching out to the parents, and that's something else that we're trying to do, because whether it's reading or leader and me, when you send the child home, if they're not getting the support they need at home, then eventually it's not going to stick. So we're now expanding and doing a lot of what's called the two generation approach. We're also trying to work with the parents as well as the children to make sure that they're supporting reading at home, supporting these best habits. And you can't lift a family out of poverty if you don't help the adults as well as the children. And that's what we're focused on.
And too often, I think, gentlemen, I think it's overlooked how, wholesome education like the leader in me and like tutoring can, affect economic development, crime, the image of the community, across the country, because oftentimes they want to see, the educational levels of the community. It can help race relations, it can help community unity. So just talk a little bit as you see it for a couple of minutes, both of you, as it relates to the overall benefit of education in the community. You can go first this time.
Okay. Well, I also have the fortune of serving on the Workforce Development Board in Bibb County. And when you ride through some of the neighborhoods and you see, the blight and the poverty, it's frustrating to know that there are like 5,000 to 6,000 jobs that are going unfilled in Bibb County right now, because the businesses are struggling to find the kind of workers that they need. And in many cases, it's just a high school education.
Right.
But, that's going back when you only, you got a 58% graduation rate and 38% reading at grade level. There are a lot of children that are getting left behind. And so I'm optimistic. I think this program, there are a lot of other programs. There's a lot more positive going on in this community in education than there was even 5 or 6 years ago. So we're headed in the right direction. We have a lot further to go. So if you want to tutor and help a child, please, unitedwaycg.org.
Blake? Yeah. I see one thing that I think has really struck me, and that is hope. A lot of our poor community, I like to say we have a tale of two cities. North Macon and downtown, and some of South Macon are doing real well. Other parts are not doing very well. But I see hope, and hope has been that now we have children that are finally recognizing the value of an education, and their parents are too. And there's a pathway out of poverty if we can just allow the imagination to see the possible, right? And so it's my belief that we have a lot more hope today in our community. And hope translates into, hey, I have a skill that I know I can go and work somewhere and earn a living, and if I can do that, I can afford to buy a car or a house or whatever I might want to do. And it gives them a vision to be able to say, I can improve myself.
Right.
And I'm seeing that for the first time, Alex. I really am. And I think George's work in helping kids read expands the imagination, right? And that's one of the great things that I think, when your imagination is filled with all the alternatives, then anything is possible if you just work towards it and strive to do your best. So I'm really encouraged about how education is transforming the children, allowing them to think about the possible and giving them hope.
Right.
Yeah, just a final thought is the resources that are available to families. If you're in a situation where you think that you need to earn more money, whether it's the Leader in Me program or the Central Georgia Technical College, the jobs are here. They just need people that are willing to learn and are willing to. We can help you and your children have a much better life. So again, if you want to, the opportunity is in this community right now.
Right. That is phenomenal. I want to thank both of you for what you all are doing. And the most important thing, it's not about you, it's not about you, not about me. It's about the community, and it's about the information, and it's about the realization that we can all do better, we can all play a role, and the key is the leader in me, and the key is volunteering, and the key is everybody taking a responsibility, much like the two of you have, in making a commitment to this community. So, United Way, what's that website?
UnitedWayCG.org.
And you know how to get in touch with the Board of Education in case there's more information that one would need on the leader in me. And it's making a difference.
That's right.
I've seen it.
Alex, I just put one plug. The BEP meets every month, and if you'd like to be involved in that, you can reach out to the Bibb County Board of Education, and they will give you the times that we meet. If you have an hour to spend during the mornings, one day a week, then spend it with the BEP and see the good work that's being done in our public schools.
There's an old expression that says, if it is to be, it's up to me. This is a call to action.
A call to action.
I'm your host, Alex Habersham. Have a great day.
www.makingblackpages.com